might be new on the call, we store recordings for governance and our profiling streams on our YouTube playlist. I'll put that in the chat. Just lets us basically, go back to discussions and decisions made in the profiling space. We particularly find it helpful, especially when we have new kind of co-editors and folks who want to kind of increase their kind of capacity and trial out some of the profiling mechanisms that we discuss. So in a lot of the sessions, our profiling sessions that we've done, like specific edits, we find it really, really helpful to just have a space that somebody can go in and say, how do you make a change to that invariant? So if you're wondering, how do you make a change to that invariant, check out the YouTube playlist, the profiling calls that are posted there.
And like and subscribe.
Yeah. That's how I feel like but at this point, I know it's like, at least it's out there for as a resource if folks are ever interested, even if we're just putting it into the web somewhere. Speaking of into the web somewhere, so we similar vein. So we talked about the recordings. If you are interested in any of kind of like the special topic presentations that we've done, we've just switched over the location of where those can now be found. I'm going to put those in this chat as well. And then you may or may not have heard about this in the last couple profiling and governance streams, or saw the post that was out on the InfoCentral forums for FHIR implementers. We have a project URL facelift. So I don't even want to like list the long string name of the URL we previously had in Simplifier, because it was very, very long. So if you're like me and you like just a little bit of a cleaned up version, just make sure if you've got like your bookmarks to any of specifically our project pages in Simplifier, so it doesn't change the canonical URLs, nothing like that, that you are accessing our content with this. I did a quick scan right after putting the post out to see if there were like places publicly where like we had hyperlinked into the old URL. So I did some cleanup on the CI build version of our guide, and I checked the BC listing, and it was pointing to the guide itself and not the project page. But if you do know places where you might have hyperlinked it in any of your documents in the past, just do a kind of quick scan for it. Basically, it's just cleanup to try to kind of utilize a consistent way moving forward. So we know that there's going to be some places that we find broken links that we'll have to kind of clean up as we go along. But it was the time to do it as we kind of prepare for solidification of both our kind of guide materials and our profiling materials to get ready to try to put them forward for a ballot. So necessary facelift. In terms of topics for today, so I was telling Elliot when I first joined on, it sounds like you guys had a great conversation last week on the governance call. I know Mike filled me into kind of all of the notes. One of the conversations was kind of around sub-value sets and terminology servers and how that plays into some of our decisioning. Anil and Tarek had reached out kind of seeing if there was time that we could put on the agenda for today to talk about that kind of terminology server topic and to kind of give us a chance to kind of ask questions, because I think it is really helpful in contextualizing some of those kind of profiling decisions that we might have to make. So I've got kind of the little chunk at the beginning for that. And then it says community issue log items, which seems small, but basically we're working our way through the list, and there's some things that merit heavy discussion, some things that are ready for either application or volunteers. So that's the kind of the biggest chunk. And then if we're feeling ready, we can return to the sub-value set topic based on what we hear. But my guess is that we'll focus on these two things today. Anything that someone was expecting to see on the agenda that you're not seeing right now for our profiling call that we should consider adding in before we jump into it? All right. I think Tarek, okay, I do see you on the call. I don't know if you wanted to share your screen or I can keep this up.
I actually don't have like a slide per se, but I just wanted to spend a few minutes, maybe speak about the project, and as you said, maybe answer questions as much as I could, and maybe we can go from there afterwards.
Okay. Sometimes I kind of find it kind of helpful when we do get questions just to write them out. Any challenges with me just kind of trying to type as I hear it, or?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Floor is yours.
Yeah. So I guess, as you know, most of you probably aware, Infoway has signed a contract with a healthcare company called Daedalus. They have a large footprint in Europe, actually. They are the same vendor that implemented the terminology server for NHS England, NHS Scotland, and they did the same thing for Nectus, the Netherlands. Also, I think they have one other client. It's called One London in the UK. So definitely a huge vendor. I think they have well over 40 years of experience, and they only do healthcare. That's their business. Daedalus themselves, they have a partnership with Cicero. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Onto server, the Australian solution. And that's basically the solution that will be powered, or actually the solution that we have is powered by Cicero through the agreement between Daedalus and Cicero. The same exact solution that's being used in Australia and Netherlands and the NHS, and actually Ontario Health, they're using Onto server as their terminology solution as well. So we signed the contract with them, and we kicked off a project to basically implement the new terminology solution. It's a cloud-based, and it's going to be hosted on Amazon. It is a FHIR compliant server, meaning that it will have, it's a one-stop shop basically it's a repository place to store, maintain, and obviously distribute the national and international terminology content. The content within this solution is going to be similar to what we have in Terminology Gateway. It will be like some sort of a human readable form like HTML. And it's going to be directly from APIs through some of their web tools like Shrimp, for instance, to browse and look for terminology artifacts. They also going to provide another feature, which is called syndication, where basically multiple server will have the built-in capacity. Basically, the server will have the built-in capacity connect and push the content of the FHIR resources to other systems. Like we can connect this system directly to Ontario Health, to Quebec, or to BC through some sort of a syndication. And that's a very straightforward functionality that they have. But that's more of a roadmap item kind of thing from the get-go, where we're trying to get the existing content that we have in the Terminology Gateway. So think about SNOMED CTAC edition, the Pan-Canadian Law Inc. Subsets. We're also looking at our Prescribit and the CCDD. Some of this content conversation has already kicked off, and some of them seems to be progressing well, especially on the SNOMED side and a little bit on the subset side. There seems to be like further conversation need to continue on, especially when it comes to the CCDD and the Prescribit, because it's not necessarily a very straightforward implementation. So they need to better understand the specific use case of Prescribit and the CCD in Canada, and see what's the best approach to help migrate from the old Terminology Gateway to the new solution. I'm just gonna pause here for a second before I carry on. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to like transcribe as I hear. So it was like focusing on the kind of national terminology. I put CTCA, CCD, there was one other, or did I?
The SNOMED, if you get the SNOMED, the PCLOC, CCDD, Prescribit, and obviously subsets.
Yeah. And subsets. Okay, cool.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to maybe pause for a second, or any question, please stop me, but I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Tariq. So just one question. So that you said it is cloud-based, so it will be hosted in AWS, will be in Canada?
So I'm so sorry, Mukesh, I'm just having a hard time hearing you. I'm not sure if it's just me or...
Oh, okay. So can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I think I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I heard it, was it like, if it's going to be deployed in the cloud, like is the expectation that it's going to be like data sovereignty will happen in Canada, right, Mukesh?
Yes.
So it is a cloud base. I mean, when it comes to data, we had conversation at the very early stage when it comes to data. There is no PHI in this information. Most of the information that as you know, in the Terminology Gateway, it's available for public. As a matter of fact, we have we have people from like, England, France, different areas of the world actually hitting our terminology gateway and downloading the content.
Okay.
So there's,
Okay. Yeah, and the other question, as you mentioned, we can connect to the other jurisdiction like Ontario, BC. So they should have to have Onto on their end too, or it
no,
is
no, you do not have to have onto, I'm sorry, maybe if I heard you correctly, you don't have to have like different instance or different, onto server and if an each location to be able to connect. The idea is this is going to be a repository place and the content can be pulled from any other system through API.
Thank you.
I mean, it's beneficial. I mean, I guess on Ontario Health, we have the same solution. I think it makes things a little bit easier, but I don't think it's a drastically different if you have a different system and we can connect through API and syndication. So
it's not just you can connect with any system, but it's that the syndication also works regardless of what server you're using.
the syndication works what? Sorry.
Well, so does syndication only work from OntoServe to OntoServe?
No,
Or-
that's not. No.
Okay.
No, that's I'm sorry. That's what I'm trying to say. Like it does not have to be like an onto server to onto server.
Okay.
And so I think that like when I think about it from the baseline perspective, so obviously we've covered a lot of ground. But some of the things that we've talked about in like very recent weeks around, like we have stub value sets in play, I'm guessing are going to be covered here. Which would be to say like, oh, we might not have to like create this kind of shell if we have this ability to kind of point it out. Like, do we have an idea of like, are these going to be done in stages or are there going to be some that are loaded first? Or is it like, like how should the CA baseline consider the work that's happening and like when it might make sense to try to start moving over to kind of pointing to those URLs versus instead of using stub value sets anymore? And like, should it be a staggered approach or kind of wait till everything's done?
Yeah, so there's twofold then, Sheridan. So what we're trying to do, we have identified certain use cases or maybe content, if I shall. So let's say we're looking at SNOMED CT. We're speaking with the project teams in conversation with the SNOMED CT CA to just understand what's the content in the terminology gateway, how it would be represented in the new solution, and then go through this conversation. I don't know how long is it going to take, but go through some iteration of this conversation until it gets to the point that we're ready to load SNOMED CT. Parallel to that, we're doing the same thing with the PCLOCD. We're doing the same conversation with prescribed CCDD. So I think from loading the content perspective, I would say at the get-go, we'll have SNOMED CT ACA, we'll have the Pan-Canadian LOINC, we'll have a lot of subsets. We might have a little bit of a delay when it comes to prescribe it and a CCDD. However, there's going to be almost like some sort of an iterative approach where we have to better understand what needs to be transferred over to the terminology solution, go back and complete that work until we finalize the use case or the content and up to the new solution. That said, the other fold of that is we are not going to shut down or decommission the current terminology gateway, I would say, for some time until everything has been loaded, validated, people had a chance to play around with it, got a good understanding what's the expectation before we go and say, okay, well, now we have a solid system in place, and then gradually we're looking to decommission the terminology gateway.
Perfect. Okay, so that I think helps us to kind of know, like, we're not working on a tight timeline to say we have to have something in place to swap things out with our own kind of pointers in our profiles.
Right.
I see just a
Sorry.
question.
Sorry, that said, from a timeline perspective, we're looking at least to stand up the solution. We're targeting mid-June kind of thing to stand up the solution. At least the solution is stood up. People can access, I'm not going to say people like, certain individual can access, at least internally, access the solution. They can, look at their content, validate, and just make sure that it does check most of the boxes for us. So mid-June, I think we'll be in a better place to have most I would say most of the content there, but there is going to be a lot of validation and training and things like that before we extend the access to external users.
I see Anil, you have your hand up, and then I just put one question that was in the chat on the slide. So we'll go Anil, and then maybe we'll go to the question.
Sure. Just to add, so right now we're looking at all the subsets from the terminology gateway and reviewing them related to, content. So we did back in January an update of the URI, IDs, which hadn't been updated in a long time. So now everything is trying to point to the terminology hl7.org, so code systems and any value sets and all of that. But we have identified, first because, those subsets were created back in 2016 and not much was done with them, so there is some issues where they mismatch, in terms or concepts or stuff like that. And I think we're looking to bring to the group where these issues are and identify them, because we want to align with the values that are on the HL7 terminology. So there is work to be done.
So we don't have to answer it now, but one of
No.
the things that I think might be helpful kind of moving forward is like, if there are ways that this community can help, to kind of have a think on that. Okay, so I see Lorraine and then I saw Fariba, and I know I'm trying to balance some of the questions in the chat. Lorraine, are you okay taking just a quick beat and a pause on your question, just so we can get, I think it was Eric's question in the chat, and then come back to you and Fariba?
Yeah, I prefer to go to Eric's question first,
Okay.
actually.
Okay, cool. So I saw the question in the chat from Eric about, so we talked about like the national terminology artifacts. Eric had asked, like, is it intended to host kind of regional value sets, like a province would want to put their value sets in there?
So we looked at several models in different countries. The expectation is this solution is going to host national and international terminology and code systems. The fact that we're aware that, some provinces and jurisdiction, they have, additional subsets or that's currently hosted in terminology gateway. That's something to be not fully confirmed yet. I mean, I don't want to just get ahead of myself, but I think the approach is leaning more towards keeping that as a national repository to include, as I said, as a repository system to include national and international terminology and code systems, similar to what other countries have done with their terminology solutions. But that said, even the current additional terminology that we have on the terminology gateway today, those will continue to carry on. We'll still maintain those in the new solution. I think we need to have this conversation with the different contact at the different provinces to just make sure that this is still practical and see what other options do we have. But as a matter of fact, I mean, and Anil can maybe just add to that.
Yeah.
Part of the maintenance process that we do on a yearly basis is to reach out to the provinces. And for the most part, that I would say for the last few years, it has been a little bit of activity going on with some of these subsets. But in the meantime, we recognize that it's been there on the terminology gateway, and I'm not intended to just, remove them like right off the bat. So.
Yeah, so initially we're going to host them, but they have to be current. We have identified issues with the subsets that are on the additional content, which is they are out of date. They haven't really been updated. And the idea is to give you the jurisdictions and those that have added them a year to update them, because we'd like to keep it on principle, active and current to whatever the international standard is. And the idea is that it's just a preliminary idea, but the idea is that we could host other additional terminologies, regional or jurisdictional ones. But the caveat is that, you can't just plonk them there, because some of the mechanisms that we have with the vendor is to provide updates, and we'd like to be able to take advantage of them rather than, a set that's outside the maintenance cycle that they have. So as soon as a HL7 comes out with a new terminology publication, which can be downloaded, I think Deadlift will, download it and give us a Delta file against all of our subsets as to what has changed or not. And that part of it we haven't worked out yet as to how we communicate those things back.
Lorraine,
Yeah.
was your question kind of in that space?
I've added a question in that space, listening to the conversation. I've got sort of 2 or 3 small questions, so.
Go ahead. Yeah, I just,
Yeah.
I'll add him here or.
Yeah, so one thing I will, like, one of the questions was around the fact that our existing implementation guides are bound to at least some of the value sets in the terminology gateway. And some of those may not have been updated for a long time. That doesn't mean they're not still in use. Particularly the ones that came from the V3 world that are still in use, and we bound to them. So I'd be a little bit cautious about the, if it hasn't been touched in a while, it may still actually be actively used, but not necessarily changed. So that's a specific concern. And I guess around the timing and coordination of changing our bindings, that where we're binding to the terminology gateway value sets, I guess is something we need to think about. And then the final question, because I know BC is in the process right now of looking at a terminology service and possibly Onto server for things like British Columbia specific value sets, etc. Who's the ongoing contact for questions about this afterwards? Who's leading this project?
So anything to Lorraine start to anything to do with the terminology solution of this project? I am the contact for this project, so I'm responsible to deliver it
Okay.
at the end of the day. So, and I think I've seen was it an email from Raman, right, from BC? I think he
Yes.
had a few
Yeah,
questions
she was
and
asking me to ask who was the contact and things.
right, yeah. And
after
I think we connected back with her through Krista. Yes.
Oh, I had no way to know that you'd done that because no one said.
Yeah, well, I didn't even know that each after you. So I got the some of the questions from Krista directly, and I replied back to her, and I asked Krista to just make sure that if Raman has any other questions to connect with me.
Yeah, it's not always clear who in InfoWay to post our questions to, so I thought I'd explicitly ask.
Yeah, well, generally you're right. I think that's why we're trying. Even on the Info Central, we're trying to have some sort of a contact us kind of like link, so people will pick and choose from the drop down menu based on the nature of the questions. But for the sake of this project, definitely I am the contact, and if I don't know the answer, I can definitely work with the vendors or other InfoWays means to provide the answer.
Yeah, you can always push
Great,
them
thank
through
you.
me because Tarek might not be on all these calls, but I will be. Okay, right. And
right.
there are a lot of subsets on the terminology gateway. We have no sort of idea as to who's using them or whether they're still active or not. And that's something that we've got to try and get a handle on, because there are 200 subsets that were created many, many years ago. I'm not sure some of them are. Some of them seem to be, contented in other subsets related to, the concept. So I just find some cleanup has to be done there.
Yeah, I expect some of them are basically orphaned and aren't in use, but just because it hasn't been actively updated doesn't mean it's not in use. So just to be cautious.
Yeah. So the intention is to put everything up there, but in batches, I suppose, as we get through a whole bunch of them and cleaning them up, to put them on the new terminology solution. And we're going to have to keep them in sync with the old PG too. So, but before, we have a process. Before we make any changes to any of those subsets, we have to post them on the HL7 forum and give time for people to sort of say if they're okay or they object to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, it's just like any changes that we have, I mean, based on the analysis that's being done, it will has to be run by the community and just make sure that we get the buy-in. So But
Yeah,
again, the
that
initial-
gives us a way to flag if we're, because I know, for instance, both Ontario and BC are using some of the provider-related codes, et cetera. So
Mhm.
it gives us a way to flag if you're looking at something that you're needing to retire, whether we're using it or not.
I suspect there's also a risk, you know, if you're gonna start, well, even if you're not gonna start posting provincial content, but various implementations may be bound to different versions of value sets. And so when you start getting things up into the server, you may need multiple revisions of a value set available.
Yes,
Multiple revision or multiple, or, oh, revision, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's
you know,
something that,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think that's something that the new solution can definitely, or is definitely providing. We can go back, you know, I guess as much as we would like. As a matter of fact, one of the exercises that we did, we just tried to give them, like, you know, a sense of how much of a download on the Terminology Gateway, how many API hits, to give them a sense of how much data are we looking to import, or how much data we're looking to add to the new system. And that's not an issue at all. We can go back to, you know, previous years, you know, versions of subsets or releases.
Fariba, I know you had your hand up earlier. Was your question answered? Or did you have another one?
Well, partially it was answered. Actually, the first part regarding we get involved in the updates, or, you know, send our recommendations or suggestions for the updates to the terminology and the value set and subsets. So that is answered. But I just want to know, what is the level of updates? For example, on top of my head, we just recently had a subset of the unit of measurement in one of the projects which we are using. And that value set is the mix of two different code systems. And we know that's not the best standard practice. Like, it's got the UCOM codes and SNOMED CT codes in one single subset. So, and I just wanted to see, is now at this time, is it the time, or this is the level of updates which we can recommend or suggest we update this value set to one single code system like a SNOMED CT, as we have all those UCOM codes which we are using in a SNOMED CT. So is that the level at this point of time we are looking into?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
This is more, okay, go ahead, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah, so Janice and I have tasked ourselves, you know, with these subsets that have two code systems in it, you know, to sort of clean those things up, especially the ones that have UCOM and SNOMED ones. We met briefly on Thursday, you know, to divvy it up as to, you know, whether this would be handled by the SNOMED team or it would be handled by the other teams, right? And I don't have an answer for you right now, Fariba, but yes, we have identified that as something that we want to tidy up. There are also some old subsets that we know that TELUS owns, like the shared, you know, provider. Those are also a bucket, and also the ones that start with an X underscore that were from the MTW days.
Yeah.
Those things have to be cleaned up. I'm not sure what, maybe, you know, we can bring you into the conversation too, or Janice, you know, because those
that would be
MTW
great.
ones, I'm not sure if we want to keep those or not, you know, so
Yeah.
we'll see.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you so much, Anil, because I would be, you know, very much interested to be involved. Already we have cleaned lots of value set, and we have some standardized value set which we can recommend. Thank you so much. I
Okay,
just
thank you.
don't want to take more time.
That's
Thank
good
you.
to know.
Thanks.
Lorraine, I see your hand up.
Yeah. Am I off mute? Yes, I am off mute. Just quickly, I mean, there are instances where it's very appropriate to have unions of code from more than one code system in a value set. So I wouldn't say automatically that that's automatically not best practice. I mean, given that UCOM is also assumed in SNOMED, I can see cleaning those particular ones up. But for instance, our value sets in the lab space in the V3 space have PLLCD plus the international LOINC when the codes you need aren't in PCLOD. So, and there's a bunch of other instances where we have unions from two code systems in a value set. So I'd want to be cautious about just saying that that's always bad practice, but I don't think it is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be LOINC code systems, there's going to be PCLO's code systems, and I suspect, you know, there are even jurisdictional code systems that people are hosting, you know. Yeah, we have to be able to grab all of that and make it available, right? It may not be in a in a single subset, but I'm not sure what the what Ontario has done. Ontario probably has come across it where they've had LOINC and PCLOCD and also CGTA code systems and stuff like that. I'll reach out to them, or Janice may know. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect.
I think the other thing I just wanted to add is just as we progress through the project, so we're working on continue to provide updates. So I think, as a matter of fact, we're working on putting together an additional kind of like an info central update to let people know where we are. We're also going to include a few FAQs, hopefully to answer some of these questions, and we can go back and update the FAQs. That's one thing. The other thing, we're trying to explore other avenue where we can, to Fariba's point, where we can engage key players, I would say, in this domain, especially like in thinking of Ontario Health, the fact that you have, or you're working towards implementing onto server as well. So there's something that we can definitely learn from your experience. And similarly with, you know, question from BC or different provinces, we're just trying to, one, kind of like provide some sort of a preview or just a preliminary kind of like, you know, not necessary access, but view of the solution, and also open the door for your feedback, not, you know, whether it's going to be like, you know, things that we can refine at the very early stages, or things that we can consider as an item to add as we continue to load all the content and mature them in the new solution.
And so like the how to get involved and like to share that feedback, you're thinking like will come through like that FAQ, or will come through like announcements?
It'll come through the announcements, right? And it'll be like, you know, an email address and connect with us, and so.
Perfect. Any other, I think I got everything in the chat. Just tell me if I have missed any of your questions.
Can I ask one question if time permits?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So Tariq, so as you mentioned, we are putting on the server on the CHI side, and some of the jurisdiction are looking like VC as well. But I was just wondering, is there any possibility under the same license which CHI is having, as we are using the simplify.net at this point, and it can be unmanaged, or some access to the each jurisdiction can be given, and they can manage their subset over there, and it will be available for everyone? Is there any possibility, or food for thought, can we do that too? Instead of buying other jurisdiction their own onto getting different license, why not to have the same license or the under CHI and given the access to the jurisdiction to manage their subsets?
That's an excellent question, Mukesh. I don't know the answer, to be honest with you, but leave that with me. I don't want to, you know, say anything, because you know, when it comes to license and money and things like that, it's an interesting conversation, to be honest with you. But leave that with me. I'll find out if there is a possibility that we can explore.
Yeah, that means
option.
basically, yeah, that way we all have the access. Means everyone can go there and access and can use it just from one place across Canada. You are no matter in which jurisdiction you are, or someone, you can go and get it from there. As we are doing for the fire in the simplify.net, okay, even if the jurisdiction have their own local profile, they can put it on the simplify.net under the same license and anyone can. So
Yeah.
that way, if we have the same way, then each jurisdiction, they don't need to explore on their side, just get the access. And being a cloud-based, there is an option and they can.
No, I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
It just,
Okay,
it
thank
just,
you.
it's a conversation that, but yeah, I'll have the conversation with the vendor, and to be honest with you, this is, and again, not trying to say anything, but this has been a lot of work going back and forth, even to just complete the MSA, to agree on different, there is a lot of legality and there's so many things behind this, believe it or not, that took months and months. So
Yeah.
I think we're in a good position to now probably have, ask the
You can
question
talk
or
to them,
have the
yeah.
conversation, but as I said, just to give me some time, if you don't mind, Mukesh, I'll
Okay, sure.
figure this and I
Thank
can
you.
connect with you directly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I thank you guys for coming on and talking to us. And I know just being able to be transparent about where you guys are at means a lot, especially as we're talking about how do we kind of future-proof some of the actual physical mechanical decisions
Yeah.
that we make in some of our profiles. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, but thanks.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm just gonna close with this. I'm not gonna, pretend that we know all the answer. It's a brand new thing to us too, as well. So we're trying to learn. I think this conversation and the feedback that we're getting from the community and from the people, like yourself, I think it does help us to direct us on the right path. But more to come, and I will promise to keep you updated as we go through. If I'm not on this call, as Anil said, he's gonna be on this call. I'm more than happy to take any other call, any other questions and answer them.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Well, so like I said, we've got kind of the slides. I'm sure that we'll have kind of opportunities to chew on this and ask further questions. Are folks comfortable? I know we've got, I'm looking at the time, about 22 minutes left. There are some community issue log items I was kind of hoping that we could go through today. Obviously, we might not be able to have all the answers on some of the more terminology related ones, but that shouldn't stop us from kind of going through some of the ones that we've had kind of in play for a while, as well as I think I've got some QA ones here. Elliot, I'm sure you've just been kind of teaming and waiting for some of these to be looked at and decisioned on.
Oh, yeah.
It's just twiddling thumbs, right? So before we go into them, I'm just going to highlight these. I'm going to put them in the chat before the end of the call. I'd like to see if we have some volunteers on these community issue items. And I apologize because they don't transition very well into the chat with some additional information on them, but take a look at them. They're all, I think, relatively straightforward. We had really, really great participation in the last few months, having some co-editors on this. So I will make the call out for volunteers at the end. So if you have one of these that you want to work on, get credit for making the change, I'll ask that at the end. But in the meantime, there's a few here that I think should be kind of ripe for community discussion. We have one that was specifically around sub-elements. So we kind of highlighted it, I think, in the last profiling call, that a few items kind of came out in reviewing differences with the CA core and kind of maybe some of the more stale approaches that we've had in the past. And the opportunity to kind of see, okay, are these kind of still filtering through in some of our profiles, and do we want to intentionally keep them? There's a couple more community issue oriented ones. There's this one around identifier type slicing that I thought we might talk about from the context of patient summary, and then some QA items. So, what do folks, I think that this one should be interesting and, not fast, but that, we should be able to talk through. If we do want to have a conversation in the space of and the mindset of terminology, we could talk about this kind of compilation one. But if folks feel like, oh, maybe we're still going to wait on some of the changes, we can wait off on that. Is anything on here standing out to folks is oh, I'd really like to start with that? Okay, equally enthused about all of these then. All right, I'm going to pull up the first one then. So this one is around, it's on practitioner role, but I I didn't have a chance to look. I think it's probably shows up in more than one place. So I'm just gonna go to the issue in particular. So it's on practitioner role, the general profile. There's both MS, so must support requirements, and cardinality requirements that fall under the telecom element. And so for the most part, I think this was something that, and just in closing up the kind of historical context, is that, you know, when our profiles were developed, we split into 3 streams. And so sometimes we'll see patterning that like is a little bit slightly different in some streams than others, because that's just what happens when you have a lot of kind of authors that are kind of working and shaping and making decisions. There are some places, and I think identifier in the baseline for patient is also one of these places that we decided to drill a little bit further into some of the elements that fall under this contact point data type. Practitioner role is one of them. And so within it, basically it says, you know, if you're supplying a telecom and there's not a must support on the telecom itself, but there is this kind of conditional must support on system. And then there's this, you should provide me a value. And no other kind of expectations on use, rank, and period. And I think in the past, we've talked about this with an identifier to say like, oh, is it meaningful if you can't supply me this? But I wanted to raise it in the context of telecom because it's one of those things where I know a lot of us are using it. And like, if it has created challenges or if it creates confusion that some have drill downs and others don't, this is the kind of time to chat about it. Maybe it isn't an issue and we love how it looks, but it's just our chance to kind of confirm, given that when we've done some DDRs in the past, it's not as common of a practice. Are folks like kind of comfortable with this? Do we have any issues with the way that it is?
I'll jump in and say I'm comfortable with it.
Perfect. All right, let me just
Um,
pull up practitioner too. I think that was another place. Go ahead.
So telecom system identifies whether it's email or text or phone or fax. And so you better be able to understand that if it's there, because that's going to totally change what you can do with the value. But you know, maybe you're a system that doesn't actually record anything other than phone numbers. So you don't necessarily need to include a system because you know in your scope all the values are phone numbers. So I think that profiling makes sense to me. You know, strengthening it to have system required, I wouldn't object to, but I can see some systems being more relaxed and might not actually provide it when it's always going to be a single value. But if you receive it, you better recognize that this particular one is a fax number. So that's why I think must support makes sense on the element.
Is there, so in, there wasn't a telecom equivalent here, but I was just gonna look at organization. When we've done this in the past, like we took a profile of identifier and applied that consistently. Well, I should say, we applied it and then we said, okay, we're gonna put that profile in a couple different places. I think we have that option as well, and could evaluate that. It was just one of those things that kind of just sticks out where in a lot of our other profiles, we really just don't have that same pattern. So I think we can keep it, but it might be something to consider like just for harmonization and practices, going the same route of identifier if we think that's a rule that seems valid across a bunch of different places. What do folks think about that? not necessary?
First blush, I can't imagine why it wouldn't make sense to apply everywhere.
Yeah, but I always hesitate on the everywhere
Yeah.
statement.
And that's where I got to.
So like maybe if we see that this is a pattern that's shown up in other places where it's been identified at the element level to make that replacement, but if we haven't previously drilled into telecom and said this is important, we have a profiling constraint, like don't automatically just apply like a profile data type there. To avoid the concerns that Lorraine, you're kind of hinting at.
So you're suggesting that we should look and find places where there's currently constraints on telecom and see if we can use the same set of constraints everywhere?
Yeah, although to be honest, like I'm not even sure that it is, right? So let me see 1 second. So we looked at organization, it's not an organization, it's not a practitioner, like as in these things aren't even must support or in the differential. So telecom's not, let me look at the other practitioner profiles for registry. So like, I guess my point is that, you know, I think this might be one of the only places that this is still showing up today. And everywhere else just says, let's see. Okay, this one has telecom. So it has system of one, okay. And this one has telecom, but doesn't have the elements identified below it. I mean, is that a problem or is it just a reflection of we use the practitioner profile and registries slightly different and maybe can't have that same expectation for practitioner role in registries?
Well, often the telecom information at practitioner comes from the colleges and their record within the colleges, where the practitioner role information in telecom is more to do with where they're working and where they're practicing. And there could be many of them, of course. And of course, we're not just talking about telephone numbers under telecom. We're talking about email addresses, websites, and things.
So, I mean, if we don't have like an immediate visceral reaction to, like, I think I'm just being OCD about it, right? Which is like, I think it sticks out to me as something that just feels like the pattern doesn't fit. But if it's not hurting implementations and we don't, like, we've reviewed this and we don't see problems with constraints that are in play, maybe we leave it. I just wanted to say, like, it's something that I've seen when we did the reviews on practitioner role a couple months back that we haven't had a chance to return to. Does anyone feel strongly that we should make a change?
In the absence of, you know, having it documented why we chose to profile it one way or another, I think there is a risk that we had a use case where maybe in this case we won't have these things, or, you know, it's unsure whether we'll ever see it. And so we decided to leave it out. You know, I think it makes sense to add it in, but yeah, I'm hesitant because I don't want to, you know, hit it 6 months from now and go, oh yeah, that's why we did that.
Mm-hmm. So if we're not having any pressing reason for the change and that the change could present the risk for doing that 6 month on the line, then I think that like, you know, we can, the reason we have some of these things to say, oh, we've reviewed it and, you know, there's various options that we have is to give us that opportunity to say, we've looked at it and we think this is the least risky option, is to kind of leave it as it is and allow for folks to tell us when they identify a constraint that doesn't work for them. Ken, I know in the chat you said USCDI has telecom system and telecom value as explicitly must support, and IPS declares MS on telecom level and not the sub elements. Yeah. So, you know, it's not harmonious, but my hope is that it's not causing issues to folks. I know a lot of us have spent time in the practitioner role review recently. So how do we want to disposition this? No, like we've looked at it now. I'm comfortable saying as the submitter, right? Like looked at it. We don't necessarily need to apply a consistent pattern to avoid the risk of potentially adding in constraints that actually had previously been removed. Does anyone think that we would need for further discussion or further like a different approach?
I'll move to disposition this request as closed, no change.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second it. Not persuasive.
And we've got 16. Okay. Is there anyone that feels that they would want to abstain from the topic? Is there anyone that would vote negatively? We don't think it should be action this way. All right. You know, with as much as I do this, I should just have like this memorized by heart, but I've got 1600.
Before you hit comment.
Yep. We'll go back and edit.
Now that we've got Erez joining us, can you put me down as ELS?
Oh, good point. Perfect. Okay. All right. So we'll put close, no change for this one. One more off of the issue log. Love it. Okay. So then the next one that we have is around, I don't have a ton of time. Maybe let's just start by looking at the invariance one and see if there's one we can immediately identify as we don't have to tackle these. These are ones coming from the HL7 ecosystem. So these were ones that you had raised that are coming out of the QA report from 6 months ago around errors that were flying with the invariance, Elliot. So some of these, like anywhere I'm seeing CA dash is likely something that like, it's an invariant that like we have introduced through the baseline. I don't know if we have a CA anything else other than the baseline. There are some like this one that looks like it might be introduced by HL7, but in your read of this, when you said these might be bad constraints, Ellie, did you mean that like this might be something because this is like repeatedly coming up across a couple different places that's a publisher issue or a validator issue, or?
No, like that one that you just highlighted, OBS1.
Yeah.
It's a problem in R4. It's not a problem in our profiling.
Yeah, and I think that's the only one, though I'm so surprised because the device stuff, I know I see the CA device. I didn't think that we put invariance on device. So let's just take a look real quick, and then we'll talk about the plan for dealing with these. So with some of these, it looks like there's obviously some logic that is repeated. So the device one is coming up on this one. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm curious if those are even relevant anymore because that was a retired profile. Basically from years and years and years ago, we used to have, where is it? This one? And then it was retired and replaced with this canonical to ensure that there was clear differentiation. I'm gonna just look to see if there are any invariants here. I don't see any. Except
Is
the
it
ones from the base.
still in the baseline source then? Like, how did I get that error?
It might be. Hmm. Interesting. Maybe it's in a cache. Oh, no, here we go. Here's this guy who's hanging out here. Oh,
Implantable.
let's take a look at this real quick. Oh, you know what? I was just fat thumbing it and thinking about this URL, but yeah, profile device here. All right, so this one is something that we have to resolve. That was the only questionable one that I had from the list of are these things that we've introduced. Let's see. So, how do we want to deal with this? Like, is this one that we can just spend time? It might be worth in the next one, like with the FirePath tester, trying out an alternative means of meeting this invariant and just go through the ones that are similar, just brute force it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a bunch of these are spelling or something similar.
Yeah. I think it's worth it. Like, honestly, like one, I hate FirePath. Two, I think it's a really helpful exercise to go with the community through and say like, oh, here's the tools that we can use when we're trying to figure out. And, you know, that invariant syntax that ends up working for us. So I'm just going to flag it for our, what would that be? The 17th, maybe the focus of the 17th profiling call, where we'll just actually go through and like, do the spelling correction ones, but then also test if there's like an alternative means of getting, of writing some of what we're attempting up top.
Elliot, are you traveling on the 17th to the work group meeting?
I'm traveling on the 18th.
Okay, so that means that we have a chance of having you on the call.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I know I'm traveling on the 17th, but I think I can make the call maybe from the airport.
Okay. So I'll flag that one for one that maybe we can actually make the edits on the call. I told you guys and I warned you about these resolved, need volunteers to apply. So, and these were ones that we don't have existing volunteers for. So, if you folks have had a chance, this is the 2500 is the one that we explicitly worked through on our last profiling call with diagnostic report. Is there anyone that would be willing to raise their hand as the editor for this one? So it's loosening the minimum cardinality specifically on the slice. It's a quick cardinality fix. It's an easy peasy one.
So I
Okay,
feel
good.
like I could take that because I mean it was my ask.
Love it. Love it. Not that you have to, but always nice to solve your own issues, right? Get to also get
Always.
to like claim the like fix to the baseline, always nice. All right. I wish this actually let us do the assignments and like tag people. All right. What about the other two? I know we're a minute over. is there anyone that is immediately screaming at, I will ask you this the next profiling call, at making these two fixes? So this was the invariance one that we talked through on patient name before, and this one is the medication code examples. That one should be pretty simple to fix. Tarek is dropping off before he has a chance to volunteer for this one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm dropping off too before I have a
Yeah.
chance to be voluntold.
So
Thank you.
I will, I'll make the ask on our next profiling call. So take a look at the ones we shared in the chat, and we'll see you guys in a week from now.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Great.
folks.
Thank you very much.